Fred Stenson is a Canadian history novelist born and raised in Alberta, Canada. He has published many Canadian historical fiction novels, one of which being The Trade in 2000. Along with The Trade, Stenson wrote a trilogy of historical novels, which all set out to tell the story of Canada and its colorful past. It is no question that Stenson is a successful writer, given his numerous awards and titles. The Trade and Lightning both won the Grant MacEwan's Authors Prize. He was a founding member of the Writers' Union of Canada and acted as its president in 1996. He has been the director of the Wired Writing Studio since 2001 and has written and edited many films, etc. The picture of Canada, as painted in the novel The Trade, is one that is far different from modern Canada in many ways. First of all, the fact that this novel is telling the story of the trade industry and recent purchase of the Northwest Territories is already a clear sign that the market and economy included many different trade techniques and a much different environment. Another major point worth mentioning about the historical times of Canada is the segregation and differences in cultures throughout the land. One of the most definitive cultural differences in early Canada and in the novel The Trade was between the quote-unquote natives or Indians and the whites. For the fur traders, often the Indians were used as slaves or hunters, or navigators because they knew the country the best and knew how to handle many situations. In other words, the segregation between the two not only demonstrated a difference in culture, but also in respect and authority. The natives were always the ones working for the others, while it was not common for an Indian to be in power over the whites. So yes, early Canada was difficult for those who were considered Indians and who were separated from the rest, but this does not mean that if you were a white tradesman, life would be easy. A lot of Stenson's The Trade is simply outlining what life was like back then and what your average man looked like and did. And this is likely one of the greatest differences between Canadians back in fur trading times versus modern Canadians. In the 1800s, men of all color worked in brutal conditions of extreme heat to extreme lows, which was more often the case in northern Canada. There was no union, there was no legal breaks, there was no workplace health and safety, but instead the Hudson Bay Company trying to make the most money they can and harvest the most fur possible, which meant employees often worked to the point of exhaustion, and their only reward was their very small pay and short break before continuing on expedition, which is laid out very clearly in one of the many expeditions covered in the novel The Trade. Overall, the three main differences so far have been the atmosphere, the segregation and the people of these times, and the working conditions and health of men, all things that which Fred Stenson has covered in his novel through different stories and expeditions back in fur trading times. Here's an example of what the atmosphere and the people were like as written by Fred Stenson in his novel The Trade. Firstly, when it comes to modern Canada, most people will agree that our main business is not in fur trading and is not located in northern parts of Canada. Today, our economy is far more diverse and has almost nothing to do with fur trading as an industry, which is why authors like Stenson write novels on this past market, because it is something that is virtually extinct in our modern Canada. Unlike the 1800s fur trade area, segregation today is now something that is severely frowned upon, and if anyone spoke and acted like they did back in the day, they would be considered racist or discriminating, which is very common in today's day and age. In other words, modern Canada is far more concerned with keeping everyone on equal grounds and avoiding all forms of segregation. This essentially means that, unlike the times in which Fred Stenson is writing about, you will not hear many people refer to someone as an Indian or native in 2018. And unlike in the workplace of the 1800s, where every person lived for himself or herself, and survival of the fittest was always in action, Today, our workplace and lives are an extremely quote unquote cushy version of the lives the fur traders in Stenson's novel lived. Unions and health precautions govern our lives and jobs today, while the fur traders of the Northwest Territories were lucky to survive long enough to even get paid or to make it through to the end of an expedition. So, now that we've looked at the differences between the two, it's time to put them together and see what the similarities and differences really are between historical Canadiana versus modern Canadiana. Firstly, economy and general Canadian era. In the trade by Fred Stenson is very violent and primitive lifestyles in the fur trade industry, whereas our modern society lives a much cushier lifestyle both in work and everyday life. As far as people goes, in the trade, the people did what they had to, and they had to fight for what they wanted. Today, our Canadians have not maintained this tough lifestyle and Canadian backbone. In the workplace, in the trade by Fred Stenson, no union. You work till the job is done, and even if it's not done, you work till the next one is. In our modern society, everyone is caught up on legalities and making sure no one is overworked or does anything even remotely dangerous. Our society, today, everyone is coming up with new names and rules to try and keep everyone equal. Whereas in the trade by Fred Stenson, society was simpler. You were what you were, and that was it. As a concluding statement of historical Canadiana versus modern Canadiana, I would have to say that Canada is far from the same today than it was around 200 years ago. However, even though it appears that today's modern Canada is lazier or more willing, modern Canada has grown and changed mostly for the better, and Fred Stenson has shown readers the contrast between the past and the average Canadian's life today.